Thank you, Pastor Waller, for taking the time out today to speak with me and Jayla and the rest of the chapel. I really appreciate it.
And just by a show of hands, raise your hand if you ever visited or are a member of Enon. Okay. So you know this man. So we're going to take the time to interview him and ask him a few questions.
All right, we're going to get started with some of the questions. Okay. The first question I have is, can you tell us about the journey that led you to the call of ministry?
Yeah, well, thank you. I've been in ministry now for, 35 years. So when I was in college, I grew up as a pastor's child like you. I'm actually a fourth generation pastor in my family. I went to college and I really didn't want to do the church thing when I was in college. I'm a musician and I used to have a band called Blues and Miss Maximus. I would play in clubs and I had blues and jazz. Well, in my super senior year, which meant it took me 5 years to get a 4-year degree, and I was really wrestling with my call to ministry, and I would pray. I was like, Lord, I don't want to do preaching, but I'll play church music. Well, one day, it was April 4th, 1987, a young man came up to me and said, the Lord told me to give you this catalog, and he gave me a catalog to Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. And for some reason, I just took it. But on that same day, my wife now, 35 years, who was my girlfriend then, she came over to me, and this was before cell phones and everything. She said, you need to call home. Because they had called her room. My mother called her room and said, you need to call home. So I called home to find out that my older brother, who had been pressing me about my lifestyle, he died. The same day that I got this magazine about this catalog about going to seminary, my brother, who would call me every week and say, Alyn, the Lord has more for you than playing in these clubs, he just died. And it hurt my heart so much that my heart was open in a way that it had not been open before. And I could just hear, in that moment, I could hear the Lord saying to me, it's time for you to preach. I mean, literally, that very next week, I said yes to the call of ministry. So that catalog, I filled out the application. It was too late to get into seminary, but not only did I get into seminary, I got a scholarship. And the Lord just opened up a door immediately from that time. I went on to Louisville, Kentucky to do my Master of Divinity. And I was a minister of music for those 3 years. After that, I was called to Pennsylvania, and my first church was in Pittsburgh. And I was there for 4 years. And then after that, in 1994, I was called to Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church, and I've been here for 30 years. So from the time I said yes to God, he just opened up opportunities for me to serve and to serve people.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
So you talk about your time at Enon. So describe your time when you first started in 94.
Wow. When I came to Enon, I was 30 years old, right? And the average age member of Enon was 65. Now, I'm about to be 60 now, but it seemed old then. 60 is not old. But when I came, everybody was 65 and they were old. And I was like, Lord, why are you punishing me? I really thought the Lord had punished me when he sent me to Philadelphia, because there was a church I wanted to go to. It was in Erie, Pennsylvania. It had a lot of young people, and I was young. But I came to Enon, and in 1994, I really believed, as I believe today, that the biggest issue that the church and our community need was the healing of families. If you were to ask me, what is sin? Broken relationships. And we really need to get back to understanding the importance of husbands and wives, and brothers and sisters, and aunts and uncles. And so, starting out at Enon, we really emphasized family, just getting back to respecting marriage and respecting being with our families and loving your families and healing families. And it was that message that after we got over the initial shock of being around my parents all the time, younger people began to come, or what people my age began to come around. And so in the 90s, from 1994 until the year 2000, every 2 years we would add a service. And so in 94 we had the 1 service, and in 96 we started the 2 services, and then by 97 we started the Saturday service, and then by 99 we added that 3rd service, and then from 1999 until 2006 we would do 4 services every weekend, because we were still over there in Germantown on Pulaski Street. We call it Enon West, and we were in that building until the Lord opened up an opportunity for us to buy the old Temple University Stadium. And that was really a miracle, because no one thought that a church would be able to get that property, because it's actually 34 acres of land in the city. And the Lord, I believe, gave us that property because we did promise the community that we wouldn't overdevelop it, and that we would keep it as a, the backyard is it's sports fields. And we said we're going to keep it that way because we really wanted to be the church with a big backyard for the community to play in. I like to say that we are unapologetically youth-oriented. I think you know that to be true, and I think that's the key to vibrancy in ministry. If I can keep a conversation with you, that's going to help us reach people for the cause of Christ. And I really believe that the future of our community depends on your generation loving God, loving your family, and really believing that having a vibrant relationship with God through Jesus Christ is still important. And that's what we've tried to do. And try to expand how we understand church, because church is not just Sunday morning and coming to worship. It's all of our lives, and it can be fun, and we can be cool and be Christian. And so that's why I got my Valencias on. And so, and it's possible to do it all, and that's what we want to make happen.
You spoke a little bit about the youth in the last question, so I wanted to ask, what about the youth excites you?
Well, I think, Jesus said this. Jesus said, except you become like these little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. I enjoy being around young people because I believe that youthfulness always has expectation. Youthfulness is always believing in the next thing. It inspires you. You all inspire me. You all push me to stay fresh and relevant. Every generation understands how to express their love for God differently. I don't expect your generation to sound like us. And so I want to learn your language. And so I like hanging around jail and find out what's going on. I like making sure that the principles, we can always have the same principles. Every generation will just do it differently. And I think that as older people, if we can hear you, we stay fresh. And if you can hear us, you will progress. And that's the goal. And so I'm excited about it. I like having athletics. I like trying new things. I think those of us who are older should always have something that we are becoming in. Because I'm a musician, I try different instruments all the time. I play the piano and I can play the trumpet, but I play at the guitar. I play at the bass, and there's always something that I don't do well, because it keeps you humble, but it keeps you growing and keeps you learning. If you ever get to the point that you're not becoming, you will be going soon. And so, and youthfulness reminds me of that.
So you talk about the differences in our generations. So what do you think is the greatest challenge, specifically for Black people today, that you may not have faced growing up?
I think I think the greatest challenge is our own internal deterioration. You know, you all are growing up in a world pretty much like the one I grew up in, and that's sad. We thought our generation was going to get rid of it. I was born in the 60s, so I remember all that stuff. You've seen my picture with me sitting on Martin Luther King's lap, and I was 3 years old. So I remember that picture because they took the picture of me sitting on his lap, and that back then, the pictures didn't come out on your phone right away. You had to get them 2 weeks later. But from that day until today, you've seen the picture. I've always had it, so I never forget it. So when Martin Luther King was killed, I remembered it. I was getting ready to be 4 years old at that time, and I'm watching TV. I knew that was the man who I sat on his lap, and his picture's in my room. And it was very scary to me because racism was big and real and right out front. But our communities were together. Our churches were full, and there was a cohesive message amongst Black people that we're going to be all right. It seems that we're back to those days again. I mean, it's scary. It feels like when I grew up that there is a part of America, not all white people, but there's a part of America that wants to bring back those days. My fear is that we are not as tight as we were the last time. Sometimes in our community, we are the least coupled community. I don't think, while you can grow up with a single parent and make it and all of that, we need to look at ways that we make the family more cohesive. So I think that the real challenge is that we're facing the same stuff that we faced when I was your age, but we're doing it with a weakened community. And that's why I think the church is so important, because the church is where we come back together so that we can be a tighter people.
Can you name one experience when things didn't work out for you, and what did you do?
Yeah. You remember when I talked about my super senior year? The reason I had a super senior year is because I wasn't a good student in college. I'm kind of talented, but sometimes when you're talented, it can make you lazy. And I was a lazy student in college, so I actually flunked music theory. And back then, if you didn't get it at that time, you had to wait a whole year to take the class. There was no way I could make it up. And I tried everything to get them to, let me take the class. My mess up made me have to take a whole nother year. And I was embarrassed. It took me 5 years to get a 4-year degree. But I learned a lesson from it. I learned that, number one, just being talented is not enough. You gotta put in the work in whatever you do. I learned who my friends were because some people laughed at me and talked about me. What I also then did, and part of this, I had to wait another 40 years to fix. So you see, because I did a 5-year degree and I had to kind of fix it, I have a bachelor's degree in music business. But I really wanted a composition. I really wanted music composition. I couldn't get to it then. I got called into ministry. But 2 years ago, I went back to school just because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, and I wanted to clean up something from a long time ago. So this year, when we have our graduation, I'm actually going to be in the line too, because I'm getting my master's degree in music. I'm getting an MFA, Master's in Fine Arts, only because, I mean, there's nothing necessarily that I need to prove or do, but I had to answer that question for myself. Could I do the work? Could I really do the music theory? And could I achieve this in my life? And even though I'm about to be 60 years old, I recognize it's never too old to learn, never too old to clean up, never too old to finish your dreams. And I'm hoping to inspire somebody with that story, because it's not like I need it for anything other than to answer my own questions and to close a loop in my own life.
So what Bible scripture do you always look back to in life and everything that goes on?
I like to say a lot, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. And the reason is because that passage of scripture is really about, it's not the physically doing something, it's really about, when Paul says that, he says, I've learned to be abound and I've learned to be abased. I've learned to, be okay if I have everything and everything's going well. And I've also learned to be okay if everything's not going well. It's in that context that he says, I can do all things. What he really means is, I can handle this. I'm going to be all right. And I try to tell myself that, and I want people to be able to tell themselves that no matter what happens in your life, you can do it. You can fix it. You can make it. If it messes up now, ride it out, stick with it. You can fix it because of your relationship with God through Christ. He'll give you what you need when you need it so that it will work itself out. All things work together for the good to them that love the Lord, who are called according to his purpose. I really believe that, and have lived now long enough to see it. But it may not be tomorrow, but it will work itself out.
And then to end things off, so our theme for chapel this year is uncomfortable. So do you have any advice for any of us who may be going through uncomfortable things right now?
Yeah, and thank you for that. Sometimes uncomfortable is necessary. Uncomfortable creates the context for us to grow. There are some things we won't get out of until it's uncomfortable enough to make us want to change. So uncomfortable is actually at times a gift. It's a gift that helps us to know that where I am, God is calling me to something more or different. Uncomfortable can be an ingredient in growth. It's interesting. When you're your age, you can find that your shoes are changing every year. My feet are going to be what they're going to be. They ain't going to grow. But you all will go. You find if you wore size 8 last year, and this year you wear a size 10 because you're growing. But the only way you really know that is that the old shoes get uncomfortable. It just means it's time to get some new ones because I've grown. So I've learned to appreciate those moments of being uncomfortable because it means something's getting ready to happen. So uncomfortable for me is a sign that something good is on the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.